This is weird. I don't know how to do an intro. Hi guys, my name is Kate. Say hi. Today I'm going to show you how I use Notion to manage my knitting projects. So I learned how to knit in 2021 and I found that aesthetically a lot of tools for knitting were outdated. There were a lot of emerging knitwear designers who are breathing new life into knitting, as well as just knitting as a hobby. Like, it's a cool girl hobby now. And I felt like a lot of the tools didn't really match the new tone. I am creative, but also very analytical, and knitting really soothes me and inspires me. And I just kind of wanted to try to, like the knitting designers, breathe new life into the way that I managed my knitting projects. And I do so digitally using the app Notion. If you're not familiar with Notion, I highly recommend looking up some just like intro to Notion YouTube videos. Notion is just like, it's an amazing tool. It's so customizable. You can really do anything with it. And like the main feature that I find so attractive about it is you can create databases and you can link the databases, pull information from databases onto a new database. I do much better with knitting when I have like a plan and a project, and like especially if I'm like buying yarn or something, like going yarn shopping, I need to have a project and I need to have that plan accessible to me on my phone so that I can double check, am I getting the correct amount of yarn? I think a lot of people have been trying to be more conscious with their consumption, and I've seen a lot of YouTubers on here do like stash buster projects and stuff like that. I won't get super into it, but my apartment burned down at the beginning of this year, so I lost my entire yarn stash. And so I really wanted to revisit my knitting Notion template once I got back into buying yarn and knitting post-fire. And I wanted to just kind of see how I could make sure that I was being wise while shopping for yarn. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into my Notion setup. So here we are at the home page, and you'll see 4 main databases on this page. We have project, pattern, yarn, and we have resources down here. You'll see that on all of my databases, pretty much all of them at least, I have an admin tab, and this is to get a bird's eye view of all of the properties that are available in a specific database, as well as mass editing is much easier in a table view. So let's go over some of the resources I have in my knitting template. If you click into the admin view of the resources database, you will see the name of all of the resources, a quick description, and then the items that live on that resource page. Some of the resource pages reference the pattern or the yarn or the project databases, but they don't live on that resource page, so they will not be here. So let's go into the first one with index, and this is a place that I keep comprehensive information that's relevant to knitting. So we have 3 indexes currently. If you wanted to add a new index, you could go in and click this new index button. Abbreviations refers to the abbreviations that are going to be present on patterns. We have the abbreviation, the definition, and the instruction of how to complete that abbreviation. Obviously, it's not completely filled out, but with time. We have the yarn comparison chart, which just compares the different weights of yarns and their tensions as well as their tool sizes. And the last one is very, very important. This is the yarn index, and this is going to be a place to keep record of all of the yarn you come across during your knitting. The index is extremely useful for determining things like your stash quantity, your wish list quantity, the amount of yarn you need for a project, or the amount of yarn you need for a yarn substitution. So it's going to be really useful to have this yarn index built out as much as possible. Here is an example of one of the yarns I have in the index. So these are the kinds of information that you will be filling out. You should be able to get all of this information from these links here. If you have incomplete information, that's fine. Just leave it incomplete, but for the most part, you really want to make sure this is filled out. There are 4 spots to enter gauge information, and the gauge is actually made up of a formula. If there happens to be a range that is a part of a yarn's gauge, you'll go ahead and unhide these properties so that you can fill out the range. And then down here, we'll get into this in a little bit later, but on the yarn index, there's a spot that'll show you any related worksheets that are relevant to that particular yarn. Now we'll go into My Stuff. So My Stuff is just a place where you can view the things that you physically own. So your yarn stash, your pattern library, and your tools. So we have, for example, this is my yarn stash by color. So this shows all of the yarn that I currently have separated into these color groups. We also have a pattern library by item category. So these are all the patterns that I have in my library. So if you want to do a new view and separate things out by a different property, you would just click up these buttons here. There are 2 databases that live here. We have publications and we have tools. So anytime you get a new publication, whether it be a magazine or a book, you want to go ahead and enter it in here. If you click into the publication page, you'll be able to see all of the patterns that are in that publication, given that you actually enter those into your library. But if you notice up here, we have patterns separated by publication. So this is really cool because you can come in and create a new view for the publication after you've added all of the patterns in, and you'll be able to see all of the patterns that you own through that publication. So like for example here, I don't have an individual PDF for each of these patterns, but if you come to the publication page, I do have the full publication PDF here, so I could download it and find that particular pattern. Versus with this is a book and I don't have digital versions of the patterns. So if I wanted to make this pattern, for example, I could come here onto the publication page, see that I don't have a PDF, and then I could go find that book and find that pattern. So I think that's pretty cool. I also have tools down here, and this is also a database that you will have to enter your own information in. It's not a view like these yarn and pattern sections up here. And so I have a space to put in your needles, your notions, your hooks, etc. If we click in here, you'll see that we have the needle size and the needle type listed. These are tags. We'll go over tags in a minute, but this is just useful for seeing all of the tools that you own. Okay, so now we'll get into page resources. So this is kind of like the about page for this Notion template, and it's going to have just certain lists of things. So we have an icon bank. If for some reason you accidentally delete an icon and you would like to use it, you can just come in and download it. So you'll have access to all of these icons. We have an icon guide, and these are more for, we have a property icon guide. So this is for any properties that are related to these things. You would change the icon to match this list. We have a list of databases. These are all the databases that are present on this template. And lastly, we have tags. So you saw a brief example of how tags are used. In Notion, a lot of times people will create something called a global tags database. I chose to break up all of the tags by type of tag rather than have them all in one database, mostly for ease of searching when you are relating these tags to different databases. For the most part, they're all just sort of one single property. It's just the title of the tag, no other information. But for a couple here, we do have some extra information. So we have notes, as well as here we have tools. And this is useful for kind of if you wanted to make sure that you kind of had your bases covered for all the different types of needles and or hooks that you have. You can come in here and see like, okay, I do have a US 3 and double pointed. I still need a US 3 straight needle. It's useful to kind of see all of the different tools you own and where you're lacking. We also have things like weight class, which is related to yarn weight. So you can really build these out as much as possible to your liking, but I try to keep them really simple. Back to the resources, we have skills. And so this is a place to keep record of all the resources you used to learn various knitting skills. I taught myself how to knit, and I used YouTube or articles most of the time. I haven't entered all this information in yet, but here's an example. If we click into the admin, these are the properties that are going to be relevant. Here's a link to the different abbreviations that are used. So say I was reviewing how do do a brioche stitch. I could come in here and be like, okay, I don't remember what that is. Click into it, see the definition. And if I wanted to, I could click even further and see the instructions. The goal is to have these split by skill category. I will build this out further before I upload the template, but we'll have like stitches, cast on, cast off, etc. And you can split it all up and view. So again, I have all the abbreviations here, as well as a link to the actual resource. When you share links to Notion, sometimes it brings over the actual page information. So that's what you're seeing here. And I think this will be very useful for keeping track of all the skills that you know. And if a skill goes dormant for a while, you can come revisit and relearn that skill. Now we have wish list. And this resource is a place to view all of the things that are on your wish list. And we have one new database that lives here, and that is links. So if I click down here, we have links separated by the wish list categories. So I have projects, yarn, patterns, needles, notions, publications, miscellaneous, as well as admin. And admin's a little different here. We have a filter that separates it by wish list category. So as you can see here, we have 3 wish list items that have not been categorized yet. So this is a yarn, this is a pattern, and this is a notion. For the gallery views, the image is going to be the page content, and so I'm just making sure that I enter that in here so that I have a good view of what the item is. Also, if you have, I'll show you here, I have a little Notion Chrome extension, and you can click in here and add stuff to knit links. Just like that, and it will go into your admin page so that you can come in later and categorize it and clean it up. I think I'll also end up putting a view of this database down here for purchased items, and that might be fun. Maybe I'll also add like date of purchase. That'll be fun to see what you've purchased over the years and how much it costs and whatnot if you're into that. Let's go over. So these are my wish list views. Again, this is a view of the yarn database and the pattern database, but we have it again by color group. We have it by yarn weight. Sometimes I'll just kind of be like, I want to knit something quickly and I don't really care what it is. I just want it to be a quick project. So I know I'll go for something super bulky, so then I can come in here and kind of see like, oh, this is my current yarn wish list, and here's the project that I want to do, and I can see if that would be something I'd be interested in working on. Again, we have by item category and yarn weight. Same thing if I wanted to, if I already had some bulky yarn and I'm like, I want to choose a new pattern that I don't already own, I can come in here and kind of see what's on my wish list. And the last resource is called Worksheets. This is going to be a place where you can find tools for planning your projects. If you want to add a new worksheet, you just come over here and press the button. But we have 2 worksheets here. So we'll go over the materials worksheet first. And this is useful when setting up a new project. It helps you keep track of the materials you need. And it's related to a lot of different things, as you can see here. I'll briefly go over this. And if you click into it, actually, you will see a relevant view of any yarn sub worksheets that are related to the yarn index. So quickly here, we have the worksheet ID, and this is just useful for naming the worksheet instead of having to come in here and every time do this naming convention by hand. You can just, once you've attached the project and the yarn, you can come in and copy this, make it the name. So that's what worksheet ID is. You link it to your project, your yarn index, and then this will be something you'll be filling out, grams needed. The rest of it is being pulled from other databases. This represents the price of all the skeins you need, as well as you have an option here to click if something was purchased or not. I don't think you'll really be ever coming to the resources page to go to these material worksheets. You will create a new materials worksheet from a project setup standpoint. And then we have yarn sub worksheet. This one, I could see you coming in, like searching this worksheet out. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to a project. This is a similar setup, but instead it's for substituting yarn. And so if you click into this page, it's pretty interesting. You go ahead and put in the original yarn, and you put in the yarn that you would like to substitute for. Then you would view the pattern. So say the pattern says you need 500 grams of Pickles Cozy and you're wanting to substitute it for this ultra alpaca chunky yarn. You put in the 500 grams for the original yarn and it will tell you how many grams and how many skeins you need to buy of the new yarn. This compatible little section is going to be your discretion. This isn't like hard and fast rules, but these are the different things that you should be looking at when comparing yarns. So the weight, the wraps per inch, the put up, the gauge, and then the fiber content as well as the yarn texture. I would say these are pretty compatible because the gauges are similar. We have similar weight. The put up is definitely not perfect, but that just means you're going to be buying more yarn. And then for fiber content and texture, I do not like blown yarn that much. So I don't mind that the texture is going to be different. And same with, I try to buy natural yarn as much as possible. So I also don't mind that the fiber content is a little different. So that's a good example of a yarn sub worksheet. It's really simple. The only things you really have to mess with are relating the yarns and then putting the original grams needed, and then kind of just deciding if you think they're compatible or not. You can always come back to these and change the grams needed for a new project since they aren't related to any databases that would affect your wish list yarn quantities or anything like that. It's kind of like a little calculator. So those are the two worksheets, and those are all of the resources I have. Pattern and yarn are going to be the same views as the wish list and library, except for they won't be split between the different filters. If you're wanting to see them split between the filters, I recommend going to your wish list or library views in the resources database. And same with yarn. You have a stash, you have a wish list, you have admin. And now we get to get into the fun part with projects. I will say that in Notion, it is extremely easy to be redundant, and I really tried to limit that redundancy throughout this template, but I definitely have found spots where I feel like it's extremely repetitive. If you have any ideas on how to make it better, let me know. Like, you can comment. Yeah, just fair warning, sometimes you will be filling stuff out and you're like, I've already related this several times. So let's get into the projects. As you can see, I have 3 different views. I have my normal admin view. I have project by status. So I'm currently in the finishing stages of this one. I need to like weave in the ends and sew in my tag and stuff like that. So it's not quite complete, but it's off the needle. I have this one that's on the needle currently. And then I have this one that I have the yarn for, but haven't quite started. And then these are all the projects that I've set up, but I haven't started or bought the yarn for. So that's the status view. And then here's project schedule. And I have this broken up by quarter because I'm a business girly at heart. I also like that it shows you the total project cost for that quarter. It's just interesting. I try to, when I'm planning these out, I try to throw in some really cheap projects, one expensive project, so that I'm not just constantly like shelling out a bunch of money. at once for projects. So these are the 2 quarters I currently have planned out. I try to just plan one project per month and then just kind of see where I go with that. It's just kind of an overview of what I would like to accomplish for that quarter. So let's go through the process of setting up a project. So I see here that I'm missing a March project for Q1 of 2024. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new one here. I'm going to schedule it for March, and I'm going to schedule the year for 2024, and that will auto-populate the quarter. I'm going to name it. I love the brand Freeze on Knits. They're one of the first brands that inspired me to learn how to knit. So I love to grab inspiration from them wherever I can. So I have an inspiration photo here of this cardigan. And as you can see, it now populated here. So we have a nice pretty view of the goal of this project, or at least the inspiration. It's not going to be exact, obviously, because that would be plagiarism. No, that would be copyright. I don't know what that would be. Let me know. Okay, and then I already have a pattern entered into my pattern database that I want to use for this. It's the Drop the Game cardigan by Kara Eng. Reminiscent of the cardigan, I already have my yarn picked out, but I don't have it entered into my database, so we're going to do that together later below. And then what's nice is once you link the pattern, it's going to pull up all of these pattern details into this little card here for you to look at. There's a lot of information here, and it can be overwhelming. It is not always useful to have all of this, but sometimes you just need that one thing to kind of make the project come into place. And so I found it useful to have these properties visible. So for example, right here, I need to put in the size of the project that I'm doing. So I can come down here and kind of see all the different sizes available, as well as the measurements related to that size. I'm gonna make a 2X. So come in here, this is a tag. There we go. Now I have the size. I'm not gonna fill these properties out yet because obviously I have not started or ended the project, as well as this property, project images, is not going to be useful until I've finished the project and I can go ahead and put in any pictures I took of it. These two are going to auto-populate from the pattern and yarn that you end up relating to the project. Really, you don't even need to see these things because the full cost is going to pull up here. But this is useful for if you have any yarn that you were gifted or the yarn was at a discount. I like to see the actual price that I paid for the project, and so there's a spot here to add any discount that you may have incurred when gathering the tools for the project. But these things aren't super useful, so I kind of have them hidden. We'll go over notes too. So we have notes here. There's a place for general notes, a place for modification notes, and then resources. So we have a link to the yarn index and a link to the yarn sub worksheet. Now we're going to go ahead and enter in our yarn to relate it to this project. So I'm going to come in here, and if I already had the yarn entered, I could just go ahead and link it from here, but since I don't, I'm going to create a new yarn page. This is what that page is going to look like. So we need to fill out all of these properties, as well as create a materials worksheet for this yarn. I think I already have the yarn index, but again, if I didn't, I could go ahead and create a new page here and open the yarn index and just fill it all out. But luckily I already have that. I'm going to enter my colorway. I think it is light mint. Oh, well, here's a purchase link. Let's see. Light pistachio. Okay. And then here is another naming convention shortcut. So now I have this named. These things are not anything you're going to fill out except for if you have any general skeins that you're wanting to buy, like just say you want one to have and be able to look at, you could put that information here. Otherwise, it's going to be related to project stuff. Stashed and used are also other properties you're going to have to fill out. Currently, since I'm just now putting this yarn in, I don't have any stashed or used, but if I were to buy the yarn for this project, I would go ahead and put the amount that I bought, and then once I've completed the project, I would put the amount that I used. This pulls from your yarn index as well as the purchase link. Wishlist cost is pretty self-explanatory. Again, you're not having to fill these things out. We'll do image. So I have the image here of the yarn. We'll do color group. So it is green. So now I've entered the yarn into my yarn database, and it's linked to the project because I clicked add in this database. And now I'm going to create a materials worksheet. We open up the materials worksheet. We do have to relate it to the yarn index again. However, since we just did it on a previous page, it should be at the top of the list. It pulls in this information, and then all we need to do is put the grams needed. Once we've linked the project, we can go ahead and do our worksheet ID naming convention shortcut. So now I'm going to come in here and look at the project. I know I'm doing a 2x, so I need to see how many skeins I need. I need 5 skeins, which is going to be 250 grams. Also, if for some reason I wanted to do some yarn substituting, you can see all of your yarn sub worksheets for this particular yarn index here. I think I already went over this. Here will be all of the worksheets that you are substituting this yarn for, and then here are all the worksheets that the yarn was the original and was substituted for something else. So once you have either started the project or clicked purchase, that number is going to go to 0 because you don't need them anymore. You already purchased them. So that's going to be really helpful for wish list quantities. This over here is going to show you the current skeins needed, and then we can also see the color palette. And yeah, here we are. It shows the total project cost, all of the information, the status. That's how you set up a project. I'll show you this one that I set up a while ago. As you can see, there's a lot more colors in the color palette, a lot more material pages. The pattern details are a lot simpler. And then I don't think I have any notes there, but I did change the tools that I used. So it's nice to have little notes there in case you decide to make this project again and you want to recreate it, but you've delved away from the pattern. It's nice to have those notes to revisit. So that is how I manage my knitting projects and kind of just like my overall knitting knowledge. This template is available to purchase. So if you like it as much as I do, if you think that it is conducive to the way you plan your knitting projects, or if you're wanting to get into knitting and right off the bat just want to have a method to the madness, you can go ahead and purchase this template. I'll put the link in the comments. I hope you enjoyed getting a peek into my brain and how I like to organize things and how that relates to my creative side. Yeah.